for 8:47?
7:47.
7:47. I want to adjourn us fast. And before we start off, I'm filling in, I'm the vice chair of the PC. I'm filling in for Mike, and I just wanted to let you know he apologizes. It was a last-minute emergency at work. And Tim, our fifth board member, is in France. But Tim is very good about sending us notes of things he questions in our board notes. So, there is one thing before we go into visitors and staff to be heard. We have to change the order of our agenda. We need to include a letter from the village trustees to the PC, and we're going to insert it between the planning day and consent agenda. Okay? So, it's all up to the principals. Oh, any staff, any of you principals want to speak on something else?
Other than say welcome to Jason and Candace, we're glad to have you on board.
Okay, go for it.
So it was our understanding that there were three pieces particularly that the board wanted to hear about tonight. One was a little recap of achievement data. What data have we collected so far this year, knowing that we still have the end of the year ahead of us with some data still to collect. So I think each of us is prepared to give a short sort of synopsis, and then you'll get more detail as we have time this summer when the SBAC scores come in. We can look at our action plans, debrief about some of the data collection points that have come in, that you'll be able to hear more in the September meeting or when we present our new action plan to you. The second was, how did SBAC testing go? So we can tell you a little bit about that. And then the third was, we just recently received the last set of data from our three years of the climate surveys. And we've had kind of a cursory look at those 3 years, but again, that's some data points that we'll really be looking at in the fall when we try update our action steps to reflect the data that we've seen. But I think we all had a few quick takeaways from the data that we saw within the climate surveys. So that's, if that's okay, we'll sort of frame it that way, if that's all right. Okay? All right. You want to start from the top
Sure.
or the bottom?
So very quickly, SBAC administration was actually quite seamless at our school. We had about 60 children take it in grade 3. I think the thing that we learned was that there was a tremendous amount of hype around the SBAC, but when it came to actually administering the assessment, it was really fairly straightforward and practical. And next year we've already agreed as a team we're not going to spend nearly that amount of time in preparing for it. We certainly are going to prep our children, get our kids ready to take the assessment, but the hours and hours and hours and hours we spent ramping it up and outlining things and re-outlining things and re-outlining things to make sure that we're ready, we won't have to do that. So we feel good about that. Our school climate survey data has come in, and we've profiled similarly over the last 3 years. The one area that we were most concerned about was social emotional safety, and we've seen a general trend in a positive direction around that dimension. There were 10 dimensions that students and parents completed, students and families, and then I think 12 dimensions for faculty. And so it looks like we're in a really good place in terms of school climate at Hiawatha.
Just a question on that. I mean, is there specific actions you've done over the last 3 years to help do a
Absolutely.
positive trend?
So we have a Respectful Learning Place team that addresses school-wide climate issues, both with our faculty and our student body. And we've been very purposeful in terms of addressing school climate issues. For example, we've instituted a practice of having student-led assemblies that address bullying and teasing, treating each other with respect and how to be a good friend and so forth and so on. They've been very successful. So that's one thing that we attribute to the positive trend. And then lastly, because I know we only allotted each other about 5 minutes to go through this, our overall overarching student performance target in our 2014-2016 school action plan was really predicated on the SBAC. Don't have the SBAC, so it's hard for us to make a judgment about how we're doing. However, we do have some mile markers in place at the local level at Hiawatha, and those are assessments like the Fontes of Pinnell reading text level assessment, the CBM, which is a curriculum-based measure math assessment. And so looking at those assessments, we have some school-wide numbers to share. So based on the math assessment, which is a standards reference assessment, about 70% of our kids are meeting that benchmark. We define that benchmark as a percentile score between the 40th and 99th percentile. So roughly over 2/3 of our kids are okay there. And then about 86% of our kids, bless you, are meeting a text level target as measured by the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment program. So jumping back to the math piece, we've done some drilling down as to what's going on with our kids' math performance, and we have a cohort, bless you, in the 3rd grade that is really struggling around math skills and math concepts. And so we identified 22 kids. We administered the full PNOA, which is we use the end of 2nd grade assessment to take a closer look at those children. We don't really have a diagnostic 3rd grade assessment, so we've used this as the next best thing. So of those 22 kids, all those kids closed their own individual achievement gap, several by more than 50%, which was our target for that particular grade level. Looking at our behavior data, because the other big area on our school action plan for 2016 was decreasing the number of behavioral referrals. Unfortunately, we've actually almost tripled the number of behavioral referrals to our time away workroom. And one of the reasons there is that this year we registered a number of kids out of district that came in with humongous behavioral needs. In fact, the beginning of the year was quite challenging in terms of trying to find the right supports via a tiered process that Amy and Erin referenced in the previous meeting, to get them to a place where they can access learning. So just an unexpected increase in kids coming in from out of district, out of state, actually. Both of these kids came in, or a number of kids came in from out of state with remarkable needs.
So does your data show that while your incidents tripled, like you said, that the number of students involved in the incidents has decreased?
Yes. So, for example, a year ago we had 765 referrals to our time away workroom and principal's office. I also serve as a referral point.
Okay.
Which is about 4.3 referrals per day. This year we had 1,872 referrals, which amounts to 11 referrals a day. Most of those referrals, the vast majority, were assigned to maybe 5 or 6 kids.
Okay.
So the majority of our kids at Hiawatha are not using our time away alternative workspace. Only a very few are.
Okay.
One of the data points I've actually shared with the Prudential Committee over these months is the change in the referral reasons. So if you've been, in the principal reports we send out, I've talked about that data point, and so initially those referrals were for negative reasons, and now they've kind of morphed into more positive, proactive break reasons.
Okay.
So that's a quick snapshot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question on your, the action plans. You said in the fall, we're going to see the results of all the testing, the SBACS tests. Do you happen to know what month that's going to be coming to us, or?
We're state's not being super forthcoming, but supposedly
Oh.
over the summer,
Yeah.
we'll see the results. So hopefully by the day we're walking in the door in August, we'll have those results in our hand, because that would be really helpful to start the school year as we've combined new classes and have kids transitioning from one school to another, that we'll have that data in our hands and it'll be really accurate because they have just taken those assessments in the spring.
Yeah,
And the SBAC window doesn't close till this Friday, so I think
yeah,
it's,
it puts it behind for you pulling all the data together.
And the other thing I would add is that looking at these local indicators, very likely as we further inform our 2016 target, we're definitely going to revamp those numbers. So again, if you recollect the Hiawatha School Action Plan, we had just a tad over 80% of our third and fourth graders take the assessment up at Fleming in mathematics, being proficient. And realistically, looking at our outgoing third graders, I'm not really sure we're going to meet that target. So we'll have to do some fine tuning around this journey that we're taking with the kids.
The other question I have, Tom, when you talk about the behavioral issues and that we had a lot of students coming in from, not from within the district, they came from other places. Did that involve the ELL? We had a huge group of ELL students that we got. Was that some of it?
Actually, at our school, we're finding that our ELL children coming in, even those children who are just, they're not English speakers, are really quite well behaved and great at following directions. And actually, a couple of the kids are members of our newly formed third grade student council. So they're very active, that they're courteous and kind. These are another cadre of kids that are coming in for whatever the reason that have really just struggled behaviorally. But we actually talked about this quite a bit with a couple of our specialist teams, and there was some conjecture early on that, we don't have the kind of programming in place, the kind of curriculum in place that supports those kids. And we actually went back and looked at the kids who have been most problematic, and we've just found that a number of them haven't even been in our school long enough to benefit from the curriculum. And so what we're anticipating for the upcoming school year is a possible similar in-migration this summer. And again, as Erin and Amy indicated, we're putting support bands in place already, anticipating that we're going to have that need, instead of waiting until mid-September or mid-October to say, oh, we have 2, 3, 4 kids that are really struggling behaviorally, so let's reactively A, B, C, D, E. So we want to, on August the 26th, that Wednesday, first day of school, be proactively ready for this need.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll go next. SBAC, we found similar things. Our third grade staff did a lot of thinking and reflecting afterwards, again, about not having it be an event, having it be sort of the non-event during the school year, and separating out sort of for the best flow of the school year and continuous instruction, separating out the literacy tests from the math tests, and that more of the math tests required content that was learned at the end of the year, and perhaps testing about like third week of May for the math test, and still timing probably late March for the literacy test, and really break that up for students. Part of our goal for the first administration of the SBAC was just around student engagement, to have students love every bit about taking the SBAC, and really wanting to send students off to Fleming, not thinking that SBAC, this is a horrible time, thinking SBAC, this is a great time, this is where I get to show my learning and being excited about it. And we really felt like we met that goal. We had student engagement. Technology was pretty seamless for us. Of course, there's glitches anytime that, we're doing anything, but nothing that wasn't pretty easily worked through. Really kept test anxiety down to a minimum, and that was our goal for the testing session. The climate survey, again, a little bit mirroring Tom, again, the social emotional security, we saw a 7 percentage point gain this year, but again, that remains a lower score than the rest of the score. The climate survey is just administered to our third graders. The questions, I think it's just also of note there, the questions are not specific to third graders, they're not specific to language for third graders, so that does present some problems for us during the climate survey administration, that it is, I believe it is the same questions that, I believe it's the same questions you would take if you were an 8th grader or if you were an older student at the third. I believe the third grade question is not adapted for third.
I think it is.
I think it's
It is very, third grade, the questions did not appear to our guidance counselor and haven't for the couple of years that they were. Maybe it's on the lower, we're on the lower end, maybe it's a,
Yeah.
you know, a 3.6 or a
you're
3.5, but there was many questions during that section for the guidance counselor of the administration. But I think that it's great data. Anyways, we also have been taking a lot more data around school climate and safe feeling of students with our positive behavior intervention and support. That we are on year 1. So just as we talked about MTSS and we talked about the 3 tiers, and we look at it as a triangle, that same structure and template mirrors PBIS. So we are in what we call year 1, and year 1 is a universal year. We are concentrating just on the universal all population of the school, where you read about our school-wide celebrations that we have in there. Throughout the year, students, when staff recognize positive behavior, whether it's safe, kind, or responsible, students get a sunband, which you'll find most Summit Street staff, you might think it's like a fashion thing that we've all just taken up wearing sunbands, but it's that we always have them on our wrist because that's what we use to acknowledge it when a student is being very safe, sitting correctly in the cafeteria line. We'll acknowledge that behavior. It really helps us as adults focus where we're putting that energy into changing behavior with positive reinforcement. So with that, we take the discipline data. We were looking for ours to really increase, and we were looking for our discipline data numbers to go up because we were looking to recognize and see everything happening in the building in order to see where the trends are. Our numbers would tell us that 4% of our building creates referrals that have 3 or more referrals. So of all of our referrals, students in our building who have 3 referrals or more throughout the year is only 4% of our building. Same as Tom said for Hiawatha, we spend an extraordinary amount of time on the 4% of our population. We have another 15% of our population that received less than 3 referrals somewhere throughout the year, some incident that happens throughout the year. We used our data to look at where our areas of our building are. So when we realized that the cafeteria is a difficult part of our building and is generating a lot of referrals for students, whole school assembly, we teach all of the what it looks like. We put the lunch line right out in front of the whole assembly. We bring out the cafeteria table, the salad bar, and we sort of pretty successfully launched what we just called Summit Street Theater, and staff would demonstrate the wrong way to do it, and then a group of students would come through and they would demonstrate the absolute picture-perfect right way to do the skill, and students stayed pretty engaged in that. And we kept doing that for every area that something would come up. Recess incidences would climb, we would teach recess, and we would then come up with whatever gimmick it was. We changed the sunband color, we changed what we're looking for, the type of sunband, and we'd really target that area. And we saw some great response. We also have another set of data because PBIS is as Aaron said, is a national program. It is also a state initiative. That as a PBIS school, we have a number of data indicators that we report throughout the year. And Summit Street School did theirs in June of last year. Again, did theirs in their 6-month time of doing them in December. We again will report, really looking at, are the expectations taught? Do students know what happens when you follow the expectations? Does everybody know the violation system when you violate being safe, kind, or responsible? The management in all of our areas, we saw significant growth. When the state brought their person around to go through our school for the day, again in December, to see how many students really know the expectations in the school, and we hit 100% of students that they went through, and they went through every classroom and asked students to cross the building, spent the day there, and they didn't get 100% of the students, but of the students they asked, 100% of them knew the expectations in the school, which was a great sort of victory for PBIS in year one. Does anyone have any questions on PBS before I go talk about achievement?
So just because Tom mentioned how basically number of incidents from year to year tripled, so did you see, you didn't see growth in incidents? You actually saw a shrinkage, or?
No, we intentionally tried to see growth in
Okay,
incidents.
but
We
did you?
intentionally tried to, but I think something is a little bit different about the data. I would bet if Tom and I collected the data the same way, our data would probably look pretty similar
Okay.
this year. The difference in our data is that we very clearly partway through the year did take half of our data and moved it to another system of just classroom-based buddy teacher students. We taught and went through some of those, and we moved some of our data over to all managed a little bit differently. Then we went through and we really intentionally taught major versus minor referrals. If you put all of our data together, I bet you that is probably fairly similar
Okay.
to Tom's data. The piece of what we did with some of the data, and I know lots of times I would visit Hiawatha and I would see some very mirror things to it going on at the same time with a different name, and ours comes with the title of it. But I would see a lot of mirror things as well to that with some of your cafeteria acknowledgments, with behavior, doing similar thing, but looking for that staff response to us tracking our staff response. And I don't think that might have been, and I don't know for sure, but that might not be part of what a school might do if you weren't a PBIS school, because that's a very PBIS sort of required thing, tracking our adult response to each of those behaviors and how we turn that part into the positive response.
And I don't know that we have spent a lot of time yet looking at the data sets, the behavioral data sets between the two schools, and eventually within the informed data system we'll be able to look at that. But really part of this is about calibration, about how we collect data. And if you have a school that's in PBIS and one that isn't, sometimes you can't compare school to school all the time unless you really sort of get into these very specific ways of being at each school. So if one school, and you can't move forward with PBIS unless you have 80% buy-in from a faculty or staff. So even if you have sister schools, one may choose, yes, we would like to go in this direction, or we would like to go in that direction, and you might end up with two different data sets. So while I think we can do some comparison, it's a little hard to say, exactly apples to apples, in particular around this piece with a PBIS school in a more formal track versus a lot of positive behavior supports at Hiawatha, but not within the same data
And just for
set.
the board's information, a number of years ago, my faculty and I looked at PBIS. We went to workshops and attended trainings, and we felt it wasn't the right fit for our school. That said, we subscribe to an array of positive behavior techniques, adult behavior strategies. We've actually worked with a couple of consultants from the Howard Center over the years, John Udis, who's a fairly reputable leader in Vermont around school climate and behavior issues, as well as a number of years ago, all of us being trained in the responsive classroom approach. So we may be using similar techniques and strategies and approaches, but we are not formally a PBIS school.
I mean, I don't have a strong opinion one way or another on PBIS. I'm just more trying to understand it from a population. There was definitely, it seemed like there was an event that caused incidents to go up.
Yep.
With an influx of population. I don't know if it's confined to one school, or are we seeing it across the board in both schools? And it sounds like you guys are getting if my interpretation, similar type of data where you both see an increase this year.
Well, we work to balance placement.
Right, and
too.
Suzanne and I do a lot of connecting with each other, and we're, I think, fairly tuned into each other's schools, which is a really good thing.
Yeah.
And Dan is gonna see the results of what the two of you are doing, and he's gonna tell us whether the year before was better than this year.
And then one other thing, so for universal level for PBIS, where we are year one, some schools stay in year one for 1 year, some schools stay in year one for 5 years. It's about where you feel you're at in that universal level of support and what your need is for tier 2 interventions. We sent our PBIS team, we went for 2 days in March for the year 2 training, which is sort of the program on how we can start to do tier 2 interventions and address some lagging skills. We still have a lot of things we want to accomplish in year 1 and universal services for all students. So I don't think we're at the point where we're going to say we are year 2 and we are still a universal year for all students next year, but we are looking specifically at that 4% of our students. What tier 2 interventions can we put in place across for that 4% of students so that we are meeting some of their needs right now for behavior and addressing some of their lagging behavior skills. And it is a challenge when new students come in because they have not necessarily grown up through our system. We might be their second school, we might be their fourth school, and that's a lot of systems to go through. Achievement data, I think our data is fairly similar to Hiawatha. Our goal and our action plan is 85%. In first, second, and third, again, all of our May data is not in Edmund Inform yet, and teachers are just they have finished collecting their data and it's being entered right now. So just even looking at our winter text levels for students in reading, we were running in the 84, 84, 86. Our kindergartners were running 77% at the winter text level benchmarking. I did pull their data separately. It's not in Edmund Inform yet, but I pulled their data separately, and their May percentage is 91%. So they are doing quite well. They're doing quite well. So with that, I will say, don't be surprised next year when I come in to say in the fall, I suddenly tell you that we have a lot of students that we are providing services for and who fall below the benchmark. As we move into the fall and we move into, we will start Reader's Workshop this fall. We will start, the benchmarks will change next year, which is our bar will go up for where students are. Right now we're looking at instructional level text levels, and we will move to the independent, sort of the chart of benchmarks for the independent text levels. And with that, you'll come and you'll say that Suzanne came here and said 91% in kindergarten, and then she's going to tell me next year at the beginning of the year that the first grade class is not where we have, maybe, I'm just guessing, maybe it's 80% of students in the fall are proficient, because with that the bar will go up and we are switching from instructional to looking at their independent level of achievement and identifying students who we wouldn't necessarily be identifying right now in May. In September we might be, because we're going to change the bar, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're just going a little bit higher. And in math, I'd say we had the same PNOA results. Our cohort in third grade is smaller, but again, we used the same strategy that Hiawatha used of delivering the full PNOA in second grade in order to target those and provide intervention strategies. And we're hopeful that in the Bridges intervention program that there are more strategies for us to pick from for tools.
Back on the climate, I mean, I know the way the third graders respond could be questions, I can understand some error there, but I noticed that the staff seems to always rate the social emotional as one of the lowest items out of the 10 or 12 questions.
I noticed that too.
Is there any specific actions that they've recommended to do to help improve that, or that there's actions being taken?
You know what? I have not asked that question. I think if I recollect correctly, that's EJ-wide. Is that
Yeah, I looked at some of
EJ-wide?
it, and I don't remember every school independently. I know some of the schools, it was also school specific, but it just,
Yeah, I did
I mean,
notice
that's
that
a group
as well.
that we can definitely get real data from.
I think that it's also important to know what exactly social and emotional security means to people. Like how globally that is within the confines of the question
Right.
for in the schoolhouse.
Yeah, for instance, digging deeper into that, maybe down to the question level.
Right.
There are some set questions. I'll give you one example. Have you ever heard anyone in your school say something unkind to another person? So if they marked yes because they heard somebody call somebody a dummy on the playground or something, then that affects that social and emotional security on that total assessment. So some of the questions, but the way that, the metrics of the assessment are arranged, the survey are arranged, they ask you questions and they're sort of staggered throughout the survey, so they'll ask it in a different way somewhere further in the survey.
Right.
And see if you're consistent with how you answer it. But, that's some examples that we looked at to try to dig deeper into that social and emotional security. What's causing the results that we're seeing here? What is it that we could do differently? And if we look at questions like, have you once heard somebody say something unkind? That's...
I think the other thing too it presents an interesting challenge, and that is that the rating scale is 1 to 5. As Dan's saying, there's 100 questions, and there's some sort of psychometric way and an algorithm that creates that final tally for each dimension. But I think at most of our schools, the social emotional piece, although it's the lowest scoring dimension, it's actually pretty darn high to begin
It was,
with.
I think it averaged like around a 3.5 or something.
Right.
It wasn't a bad score. It just what
Right.
concerned me is the parents didn't have it as the lowest, but consistently the students and then the staff always had it the lowest. And the fact that the staff did it just really jumps out at me.
Right.
You know,
Some of the questions, like Dan said, are about exposure to, if I'm remembering, because we took the survey too, is about exposure to things like that. And our staff is exposed to unkind words. They are exposed to managing students with behavior.
And looking at from it as an advocacy piece, I think all of our elementary and middle school staffs are very compassionate, empathetic, and strong advocates for children in our schools, and so that might be borne out in that kind of survey as well.
Okay, but nothing has come up in any of the action plans where somebody says, hey, we need to do something different. We're seeing a problem. You guys haven't gotten, and ladies haven't gotten any of that in all of your planning meetings throughout the years.
Actually, yeah, and so we have a team that has reviewed that data over the last 3 years, and so out of that conversation has been a very purposeful plan to address that as an entire school, as an entire learning community. So we've actively talked just about that one data point.
Okay. But I know in your reports you always have your action plan, so definitely, actually, as a board, we appreciate that because it helps us. But I didn't know if any of that was specifically driven by the staff, and you're saying they look at it holistically.
Right. So we didn't specifically talk about it in terms of the staff score. We just absolutely recognized across the board that was the dipping point.
Okay.
On those bar graphs.
All right. Thank you.
Are we ready for Dan? Are you done, Suzanne?
I'm done.
Thank you.
When I think about the 3 things or 4 things that we were asked to sort of talk about tonight, I'm mindful of they all overlap, whether it's MTSS and our school action plan, which is fully embedded in our school action plan. It runs throughout it, or it's SBAC, which is also in our action plan, or it's climate, which is also in, social, emotional safety part of our action plan. They're all interconnected. But starting with SBAC, because that's the way we're rolling this out here, I would say that also we knew in advance that SBAC was coming. Over a year ago, we had our teachers sit down and take the SBAC assessment at the 4th or 5th grade level, and they really got a taste of what it was going to be like for their students. a year from now. So I think that action really helped to engage our staff in the readiness. They were already very much hard at work on the Common Core, and they knew the two things were connected. You know, a few of the things I'm most proud about with my faculty and staff is they have really taken on the Common Core, SBAC, and the climate changes that we want to make, you know, full on. No excuses, no exceptions. And I think we see that in how we approach the SBAC. You know, we had signs around keep calm and SBAC on, just to remind us all that this is an assessment, but it's not everything, you know. So just to put it into perspective, we want our students to be prepared and do their best, and we've prepared them going into it. We were just as concerned about our technology readiness skills and our resources that were ready for the students to engage in this totally technology-delivered assessment than we were about their content knowledge and skills. In fact, we had several meetings just to examine what we felt was our students' level of readiness and preparedness for the keyboarding, for working with a mouse, for whatever aspect of this assessment we wanted to have them be best prepared for, so that their technology skills would not impact what their testing performance was. So, and I really credit our Eddie. We just shared Eddie with Summit, Dave Davidson. He did a tremendous job of getting us prepared, not only preparing, working with the staff and supporting and reassuring them that they had backup and they were going to do this, but also you know, making sure that the students felt confident about what they were doing. So I think SBAC-wise, it went very well, but it was the upfront preparation that really made the difference, and the collaboration between our technology people. Also, the support that we got from Amy Cole and Kim Gaywar, you know, who you heard is our data specialist, but she really helped to make sure that we were set up with this data up front with all the student information called TIDE. So that had to be set up in advance and put in all the students' accommodations. So she had to help train us in making sure the data that was being entered into these assessments up front was correct and that everybody understood what they were doing. So there's a lot behind before you start that first assessment of SBAC that went into it. So we'll get some baseline results from this SBAC, and we'll see where the starting line is in some respects. But we're confident that we gave it our best shot. Reaction from the students, because I informed the students. We also have a student council at Fleming. I informed the student council ahead of time so they could talk to their classmates about what SBAC was. So we had several meetings with the student council preparing them for SBAC, and they took a leadership role in their classrooms. But I also asked them after the tests were done, how did they experience it? And for the most part, the feedback from the students was they thought it was cool. They liked the fact that you used a computer. They liked the fact that they were able to use their computers, their technology skills. They felt like they wrote more than they would have if they were handwriting out answers to the questions. So they liked their first experience. It wasn't a negative experience. Suzanne was saying we tried to make it sure that it was not rah-rah. We didn't have any pep rallies or anything, but that they were confident going into it. And, you know, that's the feedback we got from after the test. Climate-wise, yeah, it's hard to really gauge, even in the trend information over 3 years, what anything of significance in terms of improvement or going in the other direction. But overall, we were very pleased with the climate results for this year. We really feel like we've made an investment with student, staff, and families in trying to incorporate some changes and some improvements. Each year that the climate survey has come out, the results have been shared with parents at PTO meeting, with students at their student council meeting and in their classrooms, and certainly with staff at faculty meetings. And so, again, we did that this year, and people were generally pleased with the results that they saw. In terms of student, the student council has a voice in safety and climate. Every student council meeting addresses safety and climate concerns. So they always have a voice in things that have to change. One recent thing that came up here last week, and particularly because I guess fifth graders are working on learning about how laws are made in the legislative process, and they're preparing bills. So 2 or 3 of the girls thought that they would propose a bill or a change to me, and they actually started a letter of a petition. And the petition was about Mix It Up at Lunch Day. Now, Mix It Up at Lunch Day is a national movement for tolerance in schools, so that students don't get into cliques and only eat with certain people every day and get to know. And we're a small school, 4th and 5th graders, you know. My approach has been, I expect all our 4th graders to get to know our 5th graders. And I expect, you know, we've developed a house system to make that more possible. So I would expect that if we had Mix It Up at Lunch Day 3 times a year, once each trimester, that's not a hardship for anybody. But these girls came to meet with me, and they showed me a petition with 147 names on it of their schoolmates, and we had a good discussion. They're bringing it to the student council this Friday to discuss it with them. And I set up a meeting with these girls and the guidance counselor, because the guidance counselor helps run Mix It Up at Lunch Day and has different strategies for that. So that's an example of an open door in terms of suggestions on how do we improve climate. And even with our best efforts of something like Mix It Up at Lunch Day, it can have an unintended effect that we need to keep our ears and eyes open for, and make some changes if that's helpful. Climate-wise, in terms of our school staff, I think we're really moving in the right direction. We've started each of the past 2 years with full staff retreats at Shelburne Farm for the whole day to start our school year. We've reviewed things that we need to improve on, both in terms of teaching and learning and also in terms of climate. We've really moved from climate being the issue to culture of our school being an issue. So we're taking a deeper look at the culture of our school and the effects of the culture of the school, from the person answering the phone or to certainly paying attention to our new safety access system. We were worried last year when we were looking at our action plan in terms of climate. It's right in here. What's the effect going to be of our new safety access system? Are parents or people coming to our school going to feel less welcome because they have to press a buzzer to be entered in? We're not finding that that's the effect. And our new secretary is certainly doing a really good job of welcoming people and a great job on using that safety system. So the feedback we're getting from parents is positive. So that's working well. In terms of our school action plan, as I said, you know, it's really embedded with MTSS. And so even though it's a 2014 to 2016 action plan, I say we're probably 2/3 of the way through this action plan already. what we're not through are all the touch points that have to do with MTSS, as Aaron mentioned today. A tiered system of interventions, we don't have that down. We're taking a look at our school schedule on how we can accommodate an intervention system. The assessment systems we didn't have in common. If you look at the data reports that the board was given here in preparation for this meeting, as Tim pointed out in his letter today, his email today, there seems to be gaps in terms of what's reported for geometry. So looking into that, there is an explanation for that. That is because of our benchmark and our curriculum. The geometry area is not taught and assessed until the third trimester. So that's why it appears as not assessed.
Okay.
It's not that it's not taught, it's just not assessed and not reported out on. The same with measurement. We've also invested in a lot of professional development and training on an assessment called OGAP, which really focuses heavily on multiplication, division, and fractions. So a lot of the assessment and a lot of the program in the first and second trimester has focused on those OGAP areas of concentration. And so that's where you see reporting out on. But, as has been said, for the third trimester and by next fall, we'll have a lot more data to share with you. And you can be assured that everything in math will be reported out in this third trimester.
Any questions of Dan?
No, thank you.
So I'm at the middle school, and in terms of SBAC testing, I did want to let you know I had one student that was not allowed to take the testing by parent request. I think I'm the only student across our 4 schools that had that situation. The rest of the students participated fully. Smooth experience. Once we figured out some of the computer glitch pieces of it, I let teams decide when they wanted to do their testing window. We followed the Agency of Education's advice and only did one section of testing every day, which made the window of testing very, very long. There was definitive feedback from our older students. They said, don't do that again. They were just like, do it like the kneecap, just do 2 sessions a day, get it over with. It's better when we're in that mindset and we can just do it. Otherwise, it just goes on forever, and by the time you get to that last day, we've had it. So we listened very carefully to their feedback. We also had one team that just finished testing last week, and we just realized that to go that long into the testing window was, we didn't get anything extra out of that by waiting that long. It was hot in the building. Students were much less interested in being able to showcase their learning than they might have been early. So as a staff, my teachers agreed that they would do our testing all together as one building next year, sort of like we did with the kneecap testing. They already have the dates, May 12th and 13th, which is a Thursday, Friday. It'll give the students a weekend break. We'll finish it up on Monday and Tuesday in May, so we've got plenty of time to do makeups afterwards, but we've had a good chunk of the school year to do the skills work, and students will be in the best place possible for that. So that's what it will look like next year. But overall, we were pleased. The students really, I don't care what room I went into, students were giving it 100%. It was pretty impressive to watch them struggle through, because even though it's a progressive assessment where if the first couple of items were too hard, it was supposed to be able to drop it down, you could see in the math, you could see the progression easily. But in the literacy, it was much harder to see how it really adjusted a whole lot. And students still plugged away, and they did their best. So we were pleased with SBAC. The school climate survey was great having the 3 years of data. If you looked at our data, you could see that we started out pretty strong results. That first year, we had a drop last year, which we know was some of that was cohort driven, with a group of students who really struggled in the 8th grade, especially with their behaviors, and it impacted us building wide. Jason, when you asked about the social emotional, even for the staff, when you have students within your building that are going off and feels unregulated, even though there's there are systems in place that are supporting those students, it doesn't feel very good.
Can you say cohort? I'm sorry, I'm unfamiliar.
So cohort, like a whole 8th grade group of students. So we definitely saw some of that pattern, that shift. Those results went back up this year to much closer to where they were the first year that we gave the assessment. We've looked also at our trend of data for discipline, and the difference between the discipline data from last year and this year is night and day. I mean, far fewer office referrals. We actually had our office area back this year, which was really nice. We didn't have spillover of students waiting to see someone or deal with some particular issue. So it felt very different in the building as well, which was good to see. We also realized after we watched that group of students go through that the nurse's office area and the guidance office area had been extraordinarily busy. So we've wanted to start tracking the data in terms of how many and what are the purposes of the visits to both the nurse's office and the guidance office. SNAP is a data system that already tracks the nurse's office visit, and I think one of the data points, one of the graphs that you'll see tonight shows you that nurse data. I will caution you when you see that, when you're going to see some students have like tons of visits. We also have several students that are diabetics, so they have regular times where they come to the nurse's office, and you're going to, there's some of that accounts for those pieces. But we really wanted to be able to get into that data and track who's coming out of which classes, how often, and why. And the same thing for guidance. So for guidance this year, we had students come in and they had to log in on a computer. What time is it? What's your issue? What is it you want to do? When are you available? So that students didn't automatically think that, oh, just because I'm here, I'm going to be able to get out of class and see somebody right away. And we got some really good data around who was accessing the offices at peak times. We could go in and talk to teams and to individual students and say, hey, we notice that you're coming out of math class every single day or every other day. Or we say to the teacher, boy, so-and-so has had so many visits to the nurse during your class. And I remember one teacher looking at us and going, they haven't been to the nurse's office. So the student wasn't asking to go to the nurse's office, but was stopping at the nurse's office and spending quite a bit of time there before going back to math class. So it allowed us to sort of dig in and look at some of that data. So we're looking at our school climate data in a variety of ways. Definitely.
Can be trapped in that system that Amy was talking about.
That's all being admin informed.
That'll
Yeah, we'll
be
be able to dump that, even though I think we're the only ones tracking the guidance data, but I think we'll be able to dump that into admin informed
We
as well.
have had a systemic conversation about school counselor visits and whether that's something that we want to add, but nursing visits are already.
Are definitely
Okay.
in
Yep.
there, yeah. But
Already
we
there.
definitely see a correlation
Yeah.
at times, especially at the middle level, a correlation between the two, so we're watching
TLC
that.
in the nurse's office.
Yeah, lots of TLC. The other thing that happens at the middle level is it's always prime time for the bullying, mean kind of behavior that pops. And so what we've been really working hard over the last 3 years of doing is as Dan was saying, creating that culture in the school about being an accepting, open, kind place to come and both learn and to teach. So we've been instituting town meetings. Bless you.
Excuse me, thank
Those
you.
have been planned by teams this year. We went from 2 last year to 5 this year. They recognize students for a variety of things that they do that meet that criteria of being kind, supportive, a good positive school community member. And so lots of students are getting recognition throughout the school year. The teams took turns doing the town meetings, planning it. And it was fun to watch the students get involved in that. And there was a little bit of one-upmanship of, as each team meeting went by, what somebody was going to do to make it even bigger and better. There also was opportunities for students to showcase their talents. So there might have been some dance routines done, some singing, some, I don't know, they did a variety of activities to sort of showcase that they could do, storytelling. It's a little bit of everything. So we had that piece, and then we're also looking at ways to break down those barriers between grade levels. It's one of the things I love about ADL is we have that. I'm going to invite the two of you to come this summer to tour ADL and get a little bit of an idea of how we differ from the K-5s. But one of the things we have is an activity period right away in the morning where all of our band, chorus, and orchestra students go out together every morning and rehearse together. So it breaks down that barrier almost right away at the beginning of the day. You see 6th, 7th, and 8th graders walking back and forth to band and chorus and orchestra, and they get to be friends right away. To enhance that piece, we piloted some multi-age homerooms this year, and that went really, really well. So the staff just voted that we will go completely multi-age homerooms next year throughout the building. So we'll have some built-in mentoring opportunities. But also it's a chance for the adults in the building to really get to know students well for the 3 years that we'll have them, because as each 8th grade group goes out, a new 6th grade group will come in. So we're excited about that. So we keep looking for ways to just make us all one big community. The other thing that's helped is our when we moved to standards-based report cards this year, we've separated out what we call our habits of learning, which is that personal responsibility, being a positive school member, and perseverance. And pulling those out this year had a really big impact on how students were not only treating themselves as a learner, but treating other students as being part of that positive community member, that we were looking for ways to be able to collect a data point on whether or not you are proficient or you're secure or expanding. Where are you in your levels of performance for habits of learning? And knowing that we were looking for those pieces changed the tone in the building, in the hallways, in the classrooms. We could just see it from the start, from the beginning of the year when we were first teaching students about what those habits of learning were, to the end of the year, massively different. It really has been eye-opening to watch that progression take place over the course of the year. When we dug down into our social emotional climate piece, especially for our students, we were, and this is the third year in a row we've seen this pattern, it's largely our ELL population that is really feeling the struggle of how do I feel safe, accepted, and in a place where I belong, in a place where I don't speak the language, I don't know what's going on, I don't know how to interact with people. So it's really making us look back at how we can make those students feel more welcome and what are some intentional activities that we can be putting in place to work with our ELL students. So we know that we started some of that work this year. We have some more action steps that we're going to put in place that you'll see in our action plan in the fall, especially targeting our ELL population, because we know that's the one that's popped for us.
It was Fleming and ADL that got hit the most with the ELL population.
Although, what did you guys get?
We
You
had,
had some too. don't
yeah,
you?
we have like 33 kids right now on our ELL.
They have the
teacher
biggest.
list.
Wow.
Yeah.
Our ELL population has outstepped our population of students with disabilities. We have a
Yeah.
fairly large percentage of kids who are experiencing English as a second
Yeah,
language.
I'm still a little lower. I used to run at about 3 or 4%. I'm up to 7.5% for ELL. I maintain about 9 or 10% for students on IEPs, but it's closing. The gap is closing.
And when you
there.
add in the elementary schools, if you look at the whole
Right,
system,
you've
steps
got
it
the
up.
big numbers.
Yep.
Yeah, so they've enriched our schools
Yes.
hugely, but we've got some work to do to meet their needs.
One question, Jason's first year on the board and Candace, how often are you meeting with the superintendent as the educational leadership team?
We meet at least once a month altogether as a large group, and then we've been meeting in a pre-K through 8 group, and then the high school also meets, so it's basically twice a month.
Twice a month, so there is a lot of time for them to be together versus the way it was, I think, a few years ago. But when you get together and discuss as a group, do you see that the younger children that are coming in, the ELL students, it must be easier for them to adjust versus being a 4th or 5th grader, or no?
I would think so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think the younger.
Yeah, because it really stands out when they're at the middle level and they come in and they so desperately want to be like everybody else, as most
Right.
middle school kids want to be. And yet they have this, some of the students that we've had, especially lately, enroll, they want to be good students. And they get so frustrated because they want to be able to read and do everything that everybody else is doing, and it frustrates them to no end that they can't just do it now. So it's really helping them with that piece. But yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
I think the-
different.
Go ahead,
I'm
John.
sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Go ahead.
I think developmentally, children who are 5, 6, 7 are, inherently so naturally welcoming and embracing. So whether it's an ELL child or a child with special needs, they are drawn to someone new like a magnet. And I think, again, if you look at social development, emotional development, things are certainly different when you're 13 or 14.
And I wouldn't say that our students don't accept them. I think they definitely do, but there's such a language barrier of trying to talk about, it's not talking about play necessarily, but at the middle level you're trying to figure out, what should you be wearing to school the next day, and somebody help me get onto my technology because I'm not able to do that, or whatever some of those things are. It's a little bit different too.
What you discussed at the CCSU meeting, Erin, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, like that cohort group that you had that was trying, is that where the intervention, you'll have something in place, like you see a group coming up? I'm assuming they probably had problems all the way up through.
But they might not have attended Essex Junction School. I think that's where it gets really tricky, is when we look at students who are in that smaller percentage of students who need tier 2 or tier 3 interventions, is to really go back and look at what was their progression. So if ADL has them as a 6th grader, what was their, that file review of what their progression was, because it's not necessarily that Essex Junction is the first up. Certainly there are students that we can do it before, but I think there also are, I don't know if, I kind of think Tom's data does mirror, Hiawatha's mirrors Summit this year, that a lot of our higher behavior needs students, they've been to several schools.
I think the other thing too, Marla, in looking at this, looking at where we are right now in 2015, is that there's been a remarkable change in things. And I know as a board member you've heard that over the last 5 years or several years. So Essex Junction is the district has, we've registered a lot of children with some fairly intensive needs. And I think certainly what we feel at Hiawatha is that we just really need to reframe how we support all of our kids and do that in a way that is efficient, I think, as Erin shared at the CCSU meeting. So, we want to be available for all the kids in our building as they come in, whether they come in and then leave, in migration, out migration. We just want to have systems in place that are much more responsive and much more proactive. And the word that we've been using on our faculty and staff is systemic. We really have to move toward a more systemic way of supporting all the kids in our respective learning communities. And that means being much more tied in to Fleming and ADL as our kids move through this school system.
Treating as one.
Yep.
Well, I want to thank all of you. It's late. By the time we do a CCSU meeting, I know you've got to probably be at school tomorrow. I know that this is probably a chore that isn't on your favorite list. So in the future, if you have things that you could share with Judy, because we're going to have a planning day coming up. If there's things that you would like to see us have on our planning day calendar, would you please share them?
Sure.
Because if there's ways we can make things easier, or ways, I wish I could be in the schools more. Having a job really affects it, because that's where you love to be, is in the schools where the excitement is. But I want to thank you all for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you guys do.
We're blessed with excellent crew. We really are.
Thank you.
Have a good night, you all. Thanks
You as
for
well.
coming.
Thank you.
All right. Onward, we are at Growing Kids, Essex Junction.
Yes. So I provided you with an update. The Growing Kids Essex Junction project is a project that's focused on families with children birth to 5 in the Essex Junction community. We are focusing on a series of areas, including transition to kindergarten, supporting parents, public communication, analysis of data, as well as looking at supporting early care and education environments. We've made a lot of progress on this, and I won't necessarily go through all of this because you have it all to review. I wanted to make sure to give you an opportunity to ask any questions you have about the project itself and the progress we've made. The board in, I think it was November, allocated $20,000 to be able to move forward with this project and really have some impact in the community. This is interwoven with the concept of implementation of Act 166 in a fairly important way. So Act 166 is the implementation of universal pre-K. For the last 9 years, Essex Junction has collaborated with an increasing number of partner preschools to provide access to private preschool through but the public school dollar. And so with the new law and implementation of Act 166, it actually gives access universally to all 3 and 4-year-olds to 10 hours of free preschool, high quality preschool. The Essex Junction Board, the Prudential Committee, allocated 70 slots for this coming year within the budget, although what we agreed to is that we would continue to implement even if we ended up with more than that, because it increases the student count, which is obviously beneficial within the realm of our budgetary work. And so next year we have approximately $10,000 in the budget to continue with Growing Kids Essex Junction. We also have 70 slots that are a separate piece of the budget. So this is all the sort of planning that's been done in Essex Junction so far with implementation of high quality preschool and support for families and improvement to transition to kindergarten. So with that, do you have any questions specifically about the project itself that you wanted to ask or make note of specifically?
I think you were very clear in the report. I found it very detailed. And I think you just covered how much was left in the budget, because that was one board member's concern last year, was we were taking the money instead of the slots. We had open slots for the pre-kindergarten. And so I think their concern was why we were going to use it in this direction.
Well, one of the problems was we couldn't find people to fill the slots, and so we were concerned about that. With implementation of 166, as well as the work of Growing Kids Essex Junction, I anticipate our slots to be pretty full this year. We're already at, I think, 62 now slots filled, and it's typical that we will get some in over the summer. And so, you know, we have actually, the top number we've ever hit, I think, is 56 slots, and so, and that's mid-year. And so we're already at 62. So the other thing, though, is that we've removed there was a removal of the requirement of school districts to approve partners for purposes of providing slots, and now the state is doing that. I think it's worth just saying out loud that the process that the state is using to approve partners is much less involved I guess, than what we had put in place as a school district. So when we were approving partners, I would do a school visit. I required their curriculum to be submitted. I reviewed their calendar. You know, I sort of did all of this body of work reviewing the program for quality, for partnership with Essex Junction. Under Act 168, the state does that approval process, and it doesn't include any of those things. There, you know, they need to have an endorsed teacher. There needs to be, they need to be providing 35 weeks of preschool. They need to be registered with DCF. The registration and licensing requirements need to be met, but there's no like on-site quality check that happens with the state, and so there are a lot more partners that are going to be coming in for us. So I think we're up now to 16 partners with a couple of more in the queue, and we were only at 12 for this year. So we're going to see more partners. I think we'll see more kids coming into slots because of that, and we'll be ahead of the curve because implementation is required by law as of FY17. Is that right? FY17. And so, but we're early adopters, along with many other school districts in Chittenden County. We're not alone in that by any stretch of the imagination. We were able to do that because of the incredible work of the Prudential Committee moving forward with access to preschool for Essex Junction residents. I mean, it's paid off dividends to be able to have that work happen, have this law passed, and not be in a place where we've never done this before, and suddenly we're adding $280,000 to the budget. Some school districts are in that position. We are not one of them. So that's a good thing.
Because we have to make sure we have a space for every 3 and 4-year-old, right?
Yes. And right now, if we fill all 70 slots, and maybe let's even say 75, we get 75 kids, we serve 40 in our internal school-based programs. So
programs that are done at Hiawatha.
So if you look at that, I mean, we're serving we're about 50%.
That comes to about 110. There's usually 100 in each class, in each age group.
So, I mean, I think we're doing really well. I feel like we've planned well. I feel like the Growing Kids Essex Junction project has been a nice addition to all of this and really shows the investment in early childhood that we know to be so incredibly important in this community. So, happy to answer any specific questions about the project. It certainly is in the update. And any other questions or thoughts on that?
I would share with Jason and Candace going to the state conferences that occur in October. It was clear, you start seeing, when you go to these things, you start seeing a momentum that's happening. So it was clear that preschool was going to be happening and it was coming down the pike. So if you do get a chance to go to those conferences, and I think Erin has done some guest speaking at some of those state conferences. So I think the staff, it's not just the Prudential Committee, but I think we have a lot of faith in our staff, and you're on top of what's going on, so it's appreciated. You got any questions, Candace or Jason? Okay.
Thanks.
Personal questions for next year.
Oh, for next year, okay. Can my child get in? Yeah. I think Grant is up. Is this something?
The Clerk Treasurer, this is a quick update. We were looking to fill the Clerk Treasurer position because Lynette Corbin, who's been serving in that capacity for over 3 decades, has decided to retire. It's kind of unusual to have one person as the clerk and treasurer, but that's how it's been, and that's how we advertised it. While we were waiting for the applications to roll in, We started looking at what other districts did, and most of them have them separated out. We started looking at what the job responsibility was, and we decided that maybe the way to go would be to have a bookkeeper do some of the more menial tasks, like, whenever the checks are signed, our treasurer was not only signing the checks, but was also stuffing them in the envelopes with some supporting background, running them through the postage machine. She doesn't really need to do that. So what we thought was we'll break it apart, have a bookkeeper for about 20 hours a week, and then find somebody to be the clerk treasurer, which would only be maybe a couple hours a week for the treasurer, and then the clerk responsibilities would only ramp up during vote times. So we pulled back the original advertisement, and we re-advertised in 2 separate jobs. And we were still concerned about the clerk treasurer because by charter, it has to be somebody who is within the village. And that pool is pretty small, 4 square miles. So we were a little stressed about that, but last week we had a discussion with Susan McNamara Hill, who is the clerk for the village, clerk treasurer for the village. And she came and talked to us and expressed that she would be interested in serving that role. We think it's a great fit. We talked to the municipal manager. There's a lot of close connections already there. There's a lot of understanding for the job. So whenever we found that, we decided to just claim victory, and that is what is going to be in your consent agenda item. It is a recommendation for Susan McNamara Hill to be the clerk treasurer.
For this reduced role, and we still need to find a bookkeeper?
We still need to find a bookkeeper, but that we've had some success with too. We had 3 very qualified candidates apply, and we have the interviews scheduled for Thursday. You probably won't see that because it's a support staff position for 20 hours a week, so you won't probably hear about that. But I am excited to have the interviews on Thursday, and I'm very confident that one of those 3 candidates will fit in very nicely.
Okay.
So that's your update, and like I said, it's on part of the consent agenda. So thank you.
Just some background for you, Jason and Kit, as you may already know, Lynette used to be very involved in collecting of taxes and people paying their taxes with her, but the village took it over and did that a few years ago. Now it's even progressed to where it's the town of Essex that's collecting.
Right.
So as everybody's trying to look at collaboration, I think it's getting more efficient.
Okay.
Very true. She doesn't get involved in delinquencies or penalties. The town does it, and we just get the amount that we're supposed to get. So it has come down, and actually it looks like the amount of hours that we're going to be spending on the budget next year for these roles combined is going to be less than what we've had in the past for the one.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No?
No questions on that.
Okay. Test team updates. We already talked in the carousel meeting about the RED study committee. We're meeting tomorrow night. We talked about communications.
Right.
I think what we're left with is Essex Junction, Rexon Park. I don't think you were officially on their list to receive the, did Brad at Essex Junction Rec and Parks, because I was still given sent the notes and the agenda for the May meeting.
Oh, I haven't seen anything.
So
I was
you
gonna ask if
hadn't
they've
seen
actually had a
anything.
meeting.
So I did email the chair
Okay.
and let her know that you're the new member.
Okay.
Okay. So I wasn't sure where that stood. So we don't have anything new to report on Essex Junction Recs and Parks.
Okay.
And how's policy?
It's going well. We had a meeting back in May. We went over 3 policies, one of which we just took out because of the model policy. That's fine, that's what happens. The other 2 we went over were about tobacco and student attendance. So we have another meeting scheduled for next week, where we will go over a couple more policies in the J policy. folder, and they've been going really well. Having the website and being able to review them and provide suggestions beforehand in the Google Docs is really, really helpful. So that seemed to speed things up along pretty well, which is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And leaders at work, I think I reported out at our last Prudential Committee meeting, we have canceled the June meeting because of all the activity this month, and we'll be meeting in July. So there's nothing new to report there. So, anything I've missed for task teams? I think we've got it. Okay. FY16 board meeting minutes. I'm assuming we're discussing this because we're going to decide in consent agenda if we're going to have a recording secretary agreement
Oh, for next year.
for next year, and Ben Dickey has volunteered to accept that position, I hear.
If you want me back.
Huh?
If you want me back.
If we want you back. I bet Candace
I was gonna
wants you
say,
back.
Very much support that.
Okay. So that's-
Even though I'm
need a
kind of doing
motion
my
for
own,
that?
but it's a lot.
Well, it's in the
It's a
consent
consent agenda. Then we're fine.
agenda. I'm assuming that what we'll have to do is actually say that we've approved that and use Ben's name.
Okay,
The same thing with the clerk treasurer, we'll have to use that person's name.
that's fine.
So is there any other discussion on,
Well, I thought there was a thing that Grant had sent us for agenda item about the summit renovations.
That's also as part of the consent agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, that's part of the consent agenda.
Yeah.
Yep.
and we can pull, if there's something
I
you
would like
want to
to pull that.
discuss, we can when we get to it.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
So, moving on. I'm not doing as good as Mike does at chairing this. I'm behind on time. So now we're to the planning day. And I'm not sure we're ready to set a planning day. Mike told me when he called me this evening that the only day he can't make is June 27th.
Okay, that's a Saturday, right?
Is that a Saturday? Is that what we're talking about, is trying to meet on a Saturday?
I
So we
think
can
we
finally
are.
get a full board?
Yes, I believe that's what we are, because once we hit July, I can't meet during the week.
Okay. So do we know Tim's schedule? We don't know Tim's schedule.
U46 just scheduled their planning day for September, date in September, like September 26th, I think it was. So there's no sense of urgency around it. I think you'd want to make sure you have 5 people available,
Maybe we
to
could-
set a date, so maybe we just should carry this over and
For
try-
our August meeting, which I think is our next meeting, maybe we put this on that agenda. Table
Yeah,
that till
we'll
then.
put planning day.
If you don't have a meeting in September, it's kind of an opportunity for engagement, and you might want to use the month of September, or you might want to extend your August meeting day and start earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a way for Ben to send us, what is that
Meeting
survey,
wizard?
the meeting? You send it out and we put the dates.
Yeah.
You give us some dates to be considered.
Yeah.
And then we pick, and then the ones we can all fit into.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you guys can supply a range, I think that's not a problem.
Okay.
But I mean, right now, I don't know if you're talking about July or September.
We're talking August and September.
How about if I look at the calendar and provide some dates to it,
That's fine.
knowing,
That's
you
fine.
know, some recommended dates.
I know Jason, we've got Tim who's in France
Yeah.
about every 2 weeks, I think. Jason's starting a new job, so he can't meet during the week.
I think that might actually affect him as well.
That might affect him
I
also.
think he's going to the new company with me, so.
Oh, okay. And I'm not sure what Candace's schedule
With
is.
enough notice, it's normally okay,
Right.
but I'm pretty well booked through July, so yeah.
So it sounds like your
Later's
preference is August,
Yeah.
is Saturdays
Yes.
Yeah.
in August.
better. Yeah,
August, September, yeah.
that should.
And I think we'd have to pick a Saturday that we could all get together, and Tim's here.
Yep.
And you will, just so you know, kind of on a related topic, in July, you will have to have a special meeting to set the tax rates for the municipal for recreation parks. But, I mean, that can be a teleconference, and it's a 5-minute thing, so.
Okay, that's fine.
So we'll talk about planning day. You'll send us out dates. Okay. So now we're to the letter from the village trustees to the PC. Was there a letter that was given to me that I'm gonna
Aaron,
read?
it might be in the book.
Let's hope it is.
Yeah, there should have been a hand-carried.
There is a hand-carried set of recommendations. Oh, look, there's more. There you go.
Okay.
So
Saw that. It
while
was
you're
all
reading, I'll give
together.
you some context. Because two of you are new, the PC board met with the village trustees in September, along with Brad Luck, to discuss EJRP, a look ahead and a look forward, a look behind and a look forward. And at that time, Marla brought up, to them that we're in the process of having a study to form a regional ed district. And she wanted to inquire as far as their position, if any. And at that time, they gave us a verbal approval of.
They acknowledged that, they acknowledged that, they weren't ready, we weren't ready to discuss it, and to feel free to come back and talk to them.
So, they have been hearing about the committee's movement forward and wanted to provide this letter to the PC and share it with the Red, to let the Red Committee know as well that they're amenable to whatever direction the Red Committee would like to see move forward, and the PC board when you dissolve. So I just think that the Red Committee is going to appreciate having this information in writing, but we wanted you to see it first. And then the trustees will be meeting tomorrow night, and they'll be reviewing the letter as well and talking with the entire group of trustees.
So if I understand this right, they're basically saying if a red's formed, the EGARP wouldn't be covered by that new red, and the town or village would have to pick it up.
What? Not quite.
Okay.
What we learned from Chris Leopold, who's the lawyer for the
Right.
Red Committee study group, is that the EJRP is the Prudential Committee's responsibility. And right now, we have an agreement with the trustees that's an annual agreement that we're running it, but we have to give a 2-year notice if either one of us are going to change that agreement. So what happens, if we become a red district, regional educational district, with the town of Essex and Westford, EJRP, the new board, would not have to honor but to the end of a contract, is my understanding. So we need to have a discussion with the trustees as to how that's going to work.
So that's accurate. The new board that would be formed would have to make a decision about the who would govern EJRP.
Okay.
They may keep it for the short term. They may ask the municipal fathers to govern it for the short term. But until those decisions are made, the trustees are saying, we're open to whatever you need.
Okay. Okay, well, that's good. I mean, versus, I guess, the
It is good
alternative,
when
so-
everybody in the.
As everybody's open to at least having the
Yes.
discussions and,
That's a good way to say it, Jason.
And I think the key takeaway there is the fact that they reference the priority to make sure that Recreation and Parks remains
Vibrant.
has all its programming and remains as successful as it currently is.
Should I read this for the video, the camera, or?
I think the committee will read it tomorrow night.
Tomorrow
and the
night.
village will read
Okay.
it.
And then I'm assuming the PC, the chair, George, Tyler, and Mike will determine when and if we're gonna meet the two bodies.
Probably after we know the outcome of
Right.
the vote.
I would think anything before that would be just
Okay.
premature.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
This is for your consent agenda. It's a hand-carried recommendation for appointment.
So,
We already just talked about that one.
yeah, I guess this is for this appointment, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we're at the consent agenda. What would you like pulled?
I would just like to have the Summit renovation bid approval pulled as a separate item for discussion.
Okay, do you want any pulled, Candace? Are you? Okay. So, I guess we should discuss the Summit renovation.
Well, first you might want to have.
Do the consent agenda first?
With the exception of
Okay.
that.
Do we know what the DGRP rack appointments are? I couldn't find those. Maybe in the.
Is there something else I have?
No.
They
It
should have been in
be
there.
one of your attachments.
It was?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just one of
Yeah, I have it. I thought I saw it. Here it is, right here.
Okay.
Is that?
Oh, that's what this was.
This is Marla.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a correction in that.
It still lists Marla.
Oh, it's still this Mara.
In the
So how do
RAC
we
appointments.
amend that?
Yeah, because Jason will replace Marla, and apparently, I don't know who's helping with that communication.
Is it like that though because the appointment hasn't been made and that's part of this consent agenda?
What
I know that's what Brad gave me.
What happens with the representative from the village trustees and the Prudential committee, we're basically appointed by our bodies. The recreation committee doesn't have a vote or a say in that because of our agreements. So we as a Prudential committee have already agreed that this year you're the rep
All right.
on there. So that's why we only need to approve Lee and Avery.
And Eric Balker? Or no, not him?
No,
I was
he's-
just talking about the ones that were starred.
He's going to be approved by the trustees.
Ah, okay.
And all three of these are current
Yep.
members, and they want to continue serving.
Okay.
And I gotta tell you, Avery is the student on that committee. It's really great having a student and a voice there,
Okay.
you know? So the consent agenda, I'm going to read it, and then someone can make a motion.
Okay.
Our consent agenda will consist of approved warrants, approve the meeting minutes of May 11th, 2015, recommendation for professional appointments for Jennifer Amarad as a special educator at Hiawatha. Is that the only one?
And then the
one you just
That's,
hand-carried.
yeah, that's down there. Then we're going to approve the EJRP Recreation Committee appointments. And the names are Lee Wiebe, I guess, Wiebe, and Avery McGilvray. And then the recording secretary agreement will be approved with Ben Dickey being the new recording secretary. We'll approve a tax anticipation note bid approval. And we'll appoint the school district clerk treasurer as Susan McNamara Hill. And then we have an approval of the EJRP new bus bid, which is going to be the Don Brown Bus Sales Incorporated.
The tax anticipation taping.
Did we?
I motion.
You
to
make
accept
the
consent
motion.
And then-
Consent agenda as you read.
Okay, any discussion? No? Candace? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? It's 3-0. Okay. Now, the next thing on the agenda, let's discuss the summit renovation bid approval. Go for it, Grant. Do you have specific questions?
Well, I just want to
for
make
Grant?
sure I understand what we're doing in the grand scheme of things as well. So we went out for a bid, and I'm going to summarize what I think I know, and you can hopefully correct me. We went out for a bid, we expected about $450,000, which is what we put in the budget. One of 5 companies bid at just under $600,000. Question there is it due to the timing? I know you said the other 4 companies did not bid because of trying to get it done this summer, and we probably gave them a short window, people fill up their slots. Did that timing also influence the fact that the other bid was so much higher than what we anticipated because of schedules?
To some extent, yes, I would say that is true. And I think that because not only are the main vendors kind of booked up, the subcontractors are too.
Yeah.
And I think what's going on is this vendor was making some conservative estimates on sub costs because he hadn't been able to track down all those pieces yet, which is why I'm still hopeful that we can actually get a final contract that's lower than the amount that was bid.
And when you said this was the same company that did the Hiawatha project.
Yes.
Did they come in under their bid when they did the Hiawatha project 2 years ago?
No, but that we put that out in advance. They didn't come in over that I recall. I mean, I would have remembered if they had come in over.
Okay, but they came in
met the timeline. Very happy with the product and service, and seemed to be done, like I said, on time and in budget.
If we were, and this is a question of how budgets work, so I apologize not knowing, if we were to not say we wanted to do it this summer, would that budget money still be able to be set aside if we said we want to do it next summer and we could get bids from everybody to be more competitive?
That's a possibility.
From a process point of view.
From a process, since it's capital funding does carry over, unlike general fund money.
Okay,
So
this is all
the
capital.
funding would still be there. Now, whether or not we get a better bid, I don't know. There's other wild cards too, as you know.
Well, cost of
cement
materials
might go through the
changes.
roof,
I understand.
oil,
I'm just
but
trying to figure out if we would be able to get more bids and help reduce the
It's-
cost of more to our budget.
it's possible. I think what's more likely is if we would have been able to get out earlier this year, we would have probably gotten a little
Right.
bit lower. But I'm not. Next year is a little bit more of an unknown because of not knowing what's going to happen with pricing.
Now there was another source of funding. You found that you were telling us. Could you help explain that one? Because
Impact fees?
I wasn't sure I quite understood that.
Yeah, let me, and I don't blame you at all. So what happens is in the FY16 budget, there is a revenue for a bond defeasance account. And what that is state aid that we got back in the day. We put into an account and we get bonds that mature each year. We use that revenue to pay the long-term debt for our roofing and I think elementary project that we did several years ago.
Okay.
So in the budget, there's $142,000 revenue for bond defeasance, which is money that's just in that account, and there's an expense for $142,000 for long-term debt.
Okay.
What happens is each year, if we get some impact fees that come in from people who are doing construction in the village, what we'll do is we'll use that money first for that long-term debt, and when that bond defeasance matures, we won't have to use all of it because we have used some of the impact fees. So say $50,000 comes in impact fees, then I don't need $50,000 of that maturing bond defeasance. And that $50,000 then from the bond defeasance gets moved into the capital fund. That's how we've done it every year. It's not
Okay,
new.
so this capital fund has benefited and should be growing each
Yes.
year based on that.
And it does.
Okay.
And every year, whenever I give a status of funds, it's a snapshot of where it looks like now, and there's always a little footnote that says, doesn't include, potential revenues.
Okay.
What happened this year is there's a lot of projects going on, and instead of, 50,000 or whatever, we've got the full $142,000 in impact fee coming in, already have it in hand.
Okay.
According to Lynette. So we can use that $142,000 for the entire long-term debt and not use any of that bond defeasance money of $142,000, which will now go over to the capital fund. And it's not, there's no smoke and mirrors here. It just so happens it's $142,000 that was budgeted. 450 plus 142 is 592.
Now, do we in the budget account for so much of impact fees each year?
We do not.
So we don't account for anything?
I never bank on impact fee
Okay.
money because you don't know whether it's going to happen. And we won't do it in the future either. And that's another reason why I didn't bank on it, because at some point you can't collect impact fees. And if we had been budgeting that revenue and counting on it, then we'd have this revenue cliff that would fall off.
Right.
And because our long-term debt is paid off in December of 2015, that's the last time that we can collect impact fees unless we do another project and go through the whole approval process.
Okay.
So this is kind of our last big push of revenue that comes in, and it comes in at a pretty good time for it to come in.
Okay. And so what you're proposing here is not going to have any impact in future years' budgets because we got all the money in hand.
Correct.
And we're not stealing from the capital fund or anything else to affect us in 17, 18 budgets.
Correct. At first, I thought it might impact us
Right.
in future years,
Okay.
but whenever this popped up and basically fully covers this project, it shouldn't. I mean, remember, if you remember the budget presentation, every year we're trying to increase new tax revenue a little bit for capital so that we can kind of use up the last of the capital fund reserve and gradually build up new tax revenue so we don't have this big increase in taxes.
Right.
So that's already planned in there, and basically because of the way it's playing out, we should be able to follow that same plan as it was presented in the budget.
Okay. And this company said they can do the job and they'll get it done this summer before the school year starts, based on...
And I'd be a little nervous about that, but, I mean, just a couple of years ago, they went through the same exact type of thing with Hiawatha. Hiawatha was a little more complicated of a project as far as the layout goes, but on the flip side, this is a little more challenging because it's actually expanding the footprint a little bit.
Right.
So it's going to be a challenge to get it all done, but, you know, Suzanne's been talking to Bruce Murdo, who's the property services person, and, you know, we know there's going to be some flexibility that we're going to have to kind of deal with, but I would say Suzanne's
Highly flexible.
on board with trying to be flexible to make this happen because it's certainly a high need.
Right, so I assume there's a contingency plan to handle like August into September in case of project
All
overages
done.
and stuff?
Yep, and technology services is all on board. We have
Okay.
we're ready.
Okay.
So I understand the concerns, I shared those concerns.
Right. I mean-
And I appreciate the fact that you've been communicating via email so that we can hash this out and have some time to really dig into it to make sure we're gonna be okay.
I just know it's desperately needed, and I would like to see it done this year, because if we do become a red district, this will be our last major thing that we have to do for the district. We'll be in good shape to unify with another district. So,
And I don't want to make it sound like there's no other projects. I mean, we do have roof projects coming up, but we have that in the capital plan. The one other kind of significant project that's kind of on the horizon at some point is with ADL. I mean, if you've been in ADL, we would like to do something different with the special education space and the family and consumer science space, but that was already kind of pushed pretty far into the capital plan.
Okay.
And it's still something I'd like to do at some point, but it's not something that we're going to have to adversely affect because of this decision.
Okay.
so are we ready to make oh, would you tell me, I didn't bring my piece of paper with the amount of the bid and the name of the company?
Yes. The
592,800.
592,800 is the amount,
And
correct?
KR Adams.
Wow.
R.K. Adams?
KR
K.R.
Adams.
Adams.
Can't believe I don't have that in my package.
So Jason, I think you're ready to make the motion for
Got
us.
everything in front of them.
I motion that we approve the additional funds for the summit renovation by K.R. Adams for $592,800 to take place this summer.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so Jason and Candace, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'm aye also. Any opposed? No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Future agenda items, we've already got down, we need to resolve planning day.
I do.
And any other future agenda items?
And it might be a planning day. At some point, I'd like to talk about our process for approving appointments. I feel like we're more of a rubber stamp than actually understand. This was probably the most one when we did Susan's appointment, that I understood all the history around it, the people that applied, their qualifications, how the selection was made. I would like us to talk about how we actually get those that we're being asked to approve and make a decision, because a lot of times I think we're not really deciding or having a whole lot of information. We're kind of like, yep, a group looked at it, we approve. And I think our job is to be kind of a check a little bit to make sure we feel everything was done and we have some understanding if we're being asked to approve it.
Would it be possible on planning day to explain the process? Because I know each school has a committee, they have community members, they have staff on it, and then they're supposed to bring the recommendation.
Yeah, I would like to, just so we can.
Okay, hiring procedure. Any other items? Candace, do you have any?
Not at this time.
Okay.
I think we put it on our planning day was to talk about the kind of the principal reports format.
Principal report
Oh, I'm sorry. You have
formats.
Yep. Great, thank you. And our goal there is to just maybe get to a common type of format for the information we're looking for in the principal reports.
I know July, Grant's going to be having to call a meeting together for the tax, to set the tax rate.
Right, you said you think we could probably do that, just a phone call.
Yeah, assuming there's nothing else that you need to put on as an agenda, it's usually a quick teleconference. You have the materials ahead of time, and it's usually just reading what it is and everybody saying yes, and we adjourn it. Part of it is also affirming the education property tax rates, which you don't really do anything with. They're set for you, but because you're a Prudential committee, you affirm them each year.
Okay.
So.
I think July, we do not have an official meeting. We have one in August that Judy talked about. So if you have anything that you want on August agenda, just let Mike know.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay.
I need a motion.
I'd say, no, I can call us adjourned at 9.
Add time.
At 9:34.